Hey there, welcome to Takeaway with Sam Oches, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Leigh Anne Zinsmeister, managing editor at NRN, and I'm filling in for Sam this week while he's on the road. This is the show where we at NRN give you an all-access pass to restaurant industry's most influential decision makers. This week, I'm sharing a conversation with Sam Ballas, CEO of East Coast Wings & Grill, a casual dining chain primarily in the Southeast and Northeast regions of the U.S. Sam was at the National Restaurant Association show last month, and he and I had the chance to sit down and catch up about what his brand is up to lately. In this conversation, you'll learn more about keeping an open mind when it comes to menu and technology updates, trusting your franchisees and getting them to trust you back, and why East Coast Wings totally rebranded a smaller fast casual chain that it acquired in 2019. Also, don't forget to stick around after the interview because I'll be sharing my 5 takeaways from this discussion, actionable insights that you can take with you on the go. Let's jump now into my conversation with East Coast Wings & Grill CEO Sam Ballas.
Are you interested in making milkshakes or smoothies at the push of a button? With no measuring, scooping, or pouring required, For Real by Riches offers pre-made milkshakes that you'll be able to customize and serve in under a minute. Plus, the blender only takes up 9 inches of counter space and plugs into a standard 120-volt outlet. Could it get any easier? The answer is yes. Check out the For Real by Riches B7 blender today.
Leigh Anne Zinsmeister here, managing editor of Nation's Restaurant News. I am on the floor of the NRA Show with Sam Ballas, CEO of East Coast Wings & Grill. Thank you for joining me today, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So here we are at the NRA Show. How's it been so far? We're on day 2 right now.
It's been really cool. I haven't come since post-pandemic or pre-pandemic. I had some teams come post-pandemic last year.
Sure.
It's invigorating to basically get back and see all the cool things that are happening in the food space, all the new technology. We come here to look for ideas for all the concepts that we own. We usually do a pretty good job of what's going on in the marketplace before we get here, so we can zero in on who we need to talk to and shorten kind of, not our stay, but shorten our business part of this show. And then we spend a lot of time walking the floor with an open mind to see, hey, let's look at everything that's going on, make sure we haven't missed anything.
What's your favorite thing you've seen so far?
I've noticed this year that the plant-based food has really grown, and we've been struggling with that process. When do we enter that in the marketplace? How do we enter that in the marketplace? What do we use to enter that in the marketplace? So we spent a lot of time yesterday for our first day. I would say probably half of our time walking that area a couple of times over, testing things, educating ourselves how they create these products. So that's been kind of the neatest thing for me to kind of take in.
Do you have any plant-based menu items right now?
We have none.
Wow.
We have none. And we're primarily based in the Southeast and Northeast. So it's not a part of the demographic of the country that really is driving that, like the West Coast is, the Midwest is. We know it's coming though. So we came not really thinking about what we might do with that, and we entered the show yesterday and happened to land in that area, and then pulled aside and had kind of an executive conversation with some of the guys that are with me, and started thinking, well, maybe we should spend some time here and really figure this out. So we spent probably 2 or 3 hours yesterday just in that area of the show.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So I know the pandemic forced you to rethink some of your brands, as it did for everybody, of course. But you were telling me a little bit earlier about how you totally rebranded one of your chains. Can you tell me about that process?
I hate to say it this way, but inflection, in my opinion, is good. Now, we don't need to have inflection like what we dealt with in 2020, 2021 again. In our lifetimes, please. Once in a lifetime. But I love inflection like that because it takes you to a place where it forces you to re-engineer yourself. We had just bought a small brand called MyFrii in 2019, maybe June. And we spent 2 or 3 months reformalizing the existence of that brand that we had. Maybe 12 units across the Southeast and Northeast. Then the pandemic came, and what little was left of that brand, we purchased it, inflected. The pandemic pretty much killed it. Right? It put it out of its misery. So we spent June, July, August, September of 2020 really thinking about now what do we do with this pandemic off-ramping. We on-ramped it. We were ready for it based on all the technology things that we do and the data that we received. So when we got hit in North Carolina as our biggest part of our hit, demographically speaking, we were ready for it. So we on-ramped it correctly, we think. We managed it correctly, and then we started thinking early, how do we off-ramp this pandemic issue specific to that brand? And ultimately, we decided to re-engineer the whole shooting match. New name called MyFrii. MYFRII, kind of to coin it, your fry, my fry, it becomes MyFrii. Different kinds of French fries. We added sliders, hand-bread chicken tenders, milkshakes, a couple of salad options, keep it fast casual, and a complete rebranding. When we did that, the philosophy of East Coast Wings and Grill has always been, if you follow any of our stories in press, we've always been unit level economics driven. The unit level has to have a profitability that makes sense for somebody to own it. So having that philosophy with the MyFrii brand, we spent January of 2022 through the first quarter of this year crashing a remodeled design store, making sure that it would function the way it needs to function in top revenue, the middle of the profit loss statement to create profitability. We're going to reintroduce that to franchising fall of 2023.
Great. You mentioned technology. What sort of technology have you been relying on lately at your brand?
Well, I think the pandemic drove every restaurant brand into some type of technology.
Absolutely.
Bar none. Everybody had to do something. We were a little bit lucky as we started looking at technology in 2017 and 18 because we were technology almost idiot mentality, meaning that we didn't understand it, right? We didn't understand it. That's something that can be taught. You can learn that. And we were kind of walking around, with a dunce cap. What do we do with this? Do we really need to have this? Well, we made a commitment in 2017 and 18. Okay, let's bury that mindset. Let's broaden our lens, change our lens a little bit, and let's start investigating this technology. We started putting technology into play in 2018, like pay at the table, with devices that work on Wi-Fi to the POS integrated, as well as mobily. So if your Wi-Fi went down, your mobile would ping a tower, and you could still close a transaction, not lose anything. Well, the pandemic came. Nobody was coming in your stores. It was all curbside. So we were able to go out to the guests with this device, pay mobily. It would then transact and close the POS system. So it was like a lifesaver, folded right into the pandemic, things that were out there, 6 feet apart and don't touch this and don't touch that. Then we're also able to drive, let's say, to a bank relationship that would open up with limited employees. Could be a parking lot away, could be a block away, with that same device. Transact a delivery and then have that device close out half a mile away from the operation and still hit a cell tower ping and close down the POS system. So from an operator perspective, it was really cool to watch that capturing of that revenue during that pandemic.
Yeah.
That was a lifesaver for the East Coast Wings and Grill brand. We had some record sales during the pandemic, specifically because we had the technology in place to sell the food, curbside, delivery, and of course with the third-party delivery people as well.
Of course, yeah, you were ready for it. Have you found that you're maintaining that off-premises business, or are your customers back in the restaurant?
I'm so glad you asked that because in all seriousness of the conversation, I went into my office September of 2020 where I inquired to the execs, hey, it's time for us to get back to the office, sit down in the conference room and start figuring out what we're going to do with this managing of and how we're going to off-ramp this thing. Then thinking it might end the end of the year. It might end the quarter one of 2021. Not knowing it's going to be a 2.5 year off-ramp, right?
Yeah.
So in that process, we knew obviously our takeout was through the roof because some stores were closed. Philadelphia, we were shut down for 4 or 5 months, only takeout. So we put a strategy together to say, hey, from our 28% takeout business pre-pandemic, how much of that can we sustain and capture as a hard number while the dining rooms come back?
Right.
And if we can accomplish that mechanism of calculation, we would have then ancillarily lifted the brand's unit level of sales.
It's like a whole other revenue stream.
Whole other revenue. So you'd have a growth in the company in AUVs just by ancillarily kind of figure out how to maintain that.
Right.
Our goal was to go from 28% post-pandemic. Can we get to 35? Can we capture 7%? We captured a 42.
Wow.
So we double-digit captured, and to today we went from 28 pre-pandemic averages. We're 42% takeout, carry-out, or third-party delivery at 42%. The dining rooms came back, so we had locations in a 12-year run that never saw a year over, let's say, 2.5 million of net AUV, and now they're doing almost 4 million or 3.5 million. So for the franchisee, it's a great testament to the brand who decided, hey, during the pandemic, we're not going to worry about selling deals. We're not going to worry about franchising out. Let's concentrate on the core hemisphere of the company, which is the existing stores, and how do we get them in shape to be ready to off-ramp correctly.
Right.
And we're not perfect. We had hiccups.
Sure.
But for the majority of the brand, our franchisees saw the off-ramping of the pandemic grow their EBITDAs by almost 400 basis points from the pre-pandemic numbers. And I think it was a combination of us being ready as a brand and support, and the franchisee embracing what we're doing and having a big trust factor in how we manage the on-ramping of the pandemic, manage the pandemic, and then we had a strategy on how we're going to off-ramp the pandemic to get back to normal.
So now that we're on the other side, what's ahead? What are you looking at in the next 6 months or so?
So what we did during the pandemic, we opened a store in September of 2020.
Okay.
2,240 square feet. So I said to my team, I'm going to invest as the founding CEO, my money, and do this mini-me sized box at the East Coast Wings and Grill. And I opened it September 2020 in the heart of the pandemic.
Okay.
So limited dining room, takeout. That store shows significant dollar movement.
Sure.
As the off-ramping continued and we now gone to post-pandemic, that store showed almost $1.7 million in AUV for that location at 64 seats in Clemens, North Carolina.
Okay.
So from that data, after a year of collecting data and validating the data, scrubbing the data to make sure we understood all pieces of the data, we decided to shrink our box. We had already shrunk our box from 4,500 square feet down to 3,000 pre-pandemic.
Okay.
Now we're opening up stores between 2,400 and 2,800 square feet post-pandemic. So for us in the future, we're going to be probably hitting about the 2,800 to 2,700 square foot size, which reduces development costs, reduces the need of employment that has now become an issue.
Right.
So we think the box size, having been re-engineered in the middle of the pandemic, and having the brand CEO saying, hey, I'll put my dollars to work to proof this out. And if it's wrong, it costs me. It don't cost the company. It won't cost the franchisees.
Right.
I think that was a huge hit for the brand. And basically, we're taking that course now in the ability to run the store with almost a 40% reduction in development costs and a 30% reduction in labor force.
Wow. Are these new units mostly new builds, or are you moving into spaces that exist? Or?
Most of them, the ones that are coming out right now, like Florence, South Carolina opened up last week. That was a ground-up developer build for our franchisee who owns other brands as well.
Okay.
They own us, they own Sonics, they own Duck Donuts, and they bought a couple of our locations to develop. Our Arlington, Virginia is going to be an inline space, so we're seeing, we haven't seen yet the second gen takeover spacing. We have a strategy for that because we think that the economy is going to drive second and third gen space opportunities in Q4 this year and into next year, as we still feel like the recession is here, but until the government and the media says it's here, it's not going to be a movement from the consumer base. We think that's coming, so we're waiting for some more tightening.
Okay.
And so we're planning on second and third gen spaces, and we have a strategy for some conversions on people that haven't figured out how to navigate through the inflation.
Have you seen any change in consumer behavior this year, like related to the economy, or is it pretty much steady?
Our brand hasn't seen much at all, and we didn't take a lot of price hit to the consumer during the pandemic. We had one increase in our menus. We had a second, some family groups we tweaked a little bit, but a lot of people in the wing space that were taking some enormous increases in prices to the consumer because the inflationary cost of the goods was high. We were able to maintain a good cost of buying. We're able to bring product in, outsourcing as far as chili during the pandemic, keeping our cost of goods low. So we didn't take a big hit in the menu for the consumer. We actually put a white paper out to the franchisees and said, listen, if you're willing to lose or take a 200 basis points hit in your bottom line, we promise you, we've done the homework, we can weather the increase of price that you're saying we need versus the commodity, as we saw it was going to come down. We had probably a quarter and a half of that pressure, and the commodities started dropping. The wing prices for our wing concept started going down to the floor. And we came out like a bandit. We came out really looking brilliant to the franchisees, and all we were doing was tracking commodity prices and talking to the manufacturing people and getting kind of the inside scoop of where it's going on. Looking at the international buying, there's a lot of international buying, how much is being shipped overseas. So we track those charts to see when international buying peaks, we know that a 30-day lag, price is going to go up. So we lock down prices before that lag happens. So a lot of technology driven, more stock and bond mentality charting in our office to follow those commodities.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, one last question. What is exciting you in the restaurant industry as a whole right now? Like, what keeps you going in this industry?
From a franchising perspective, watching new people come into the franchise model, which is the best generational wealth creator of business model that's ever been created. So watching Florence, South Carolina, 2,400 square feet open up, who owns other brands, who had a hard time getting that store developed and open. Watching that store open on a $12,000 and $10,000 daily sales net, and the reaction of that franchisee going, wow, you guys were right about this, or my investigation was right about this. Seeing that euphoria validation with franchisees, and watching them in the restaurant with their 10-year-old sons and daughters walking around, like I said, it's the best generational wealth developing model, financial model, is franchising. I think it's ever been developed in this country. That for me keeps me going. From a foodie perspective, this country loves to eat out. And I'm really big about high quality. So we're always engineering and re-engineering to keep our quality as sustainable as high as we can.
Very nice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Are you interested in making milkshakes or smoothies at the push of a button? With no measuring, scooping, or pouring required, For Real by Riches offers pre-made milkshakes that you'll be able to customize and serve in under a minute. Plus, the blender only takes up 9 inches of counter space and plugs into a standard 120-volt outlet. Could it get any easier? The answer is yes. Check out the For Real by Riches B7 blender today.
That was my interview with East Coast Wings and Grill CEO Sam Ballas. So, what should you take away from that conversation? Here are my 5 takeaways. 1. Keep an open mind. East Coast Wings and Grill currently doesn't offer any plant-based menu items, but Sam and his team still spent half a day at the NRA Show exploring those options and seeing what's out there, because they know it's something that their consumers want, and they want to get ahead of that demand and offer something that they've never offered before. 2, get creative and don't be afraid to change what's not working. East Coast Wings and Grill totally rebranded MyFrii after it acquired the chain in 2019. It knew that it wasn't quite working for them, so they changed the name, they updated the menu, but they kept it as a fast casual chain because they knew that that segment was something that was working for their audience. So don't be afraid to mix it up and change the things that aren't working while keeping things that are working the same. Number 3, focus on the unit level. East Coast Wings and Grill tested out one MyFrii unit after the rebrand to make sure that it was ready to scale. Even though they started this rebrand 2 years ago, they're not launching franchising until this coming fall. They took their time. They want to make sure it's right and ready to go. And they've always focused on unit economics at their East Coast restaurants too. Number 4, learn new things. East Coast Wings and Grill made a commitment to get better at technology in 2017, and it totally paid off. They got Wi-Fi enabled devices that also had mobile capabilities so that they could get ahead of any IT problems. They integrated table systems with their POS. They launched curbside pickup. And so they were totally ready when they had to be in 2020. And finally, number 5, franchisee trust goes both ways. If you trust your franchisees to know to do the best things for their location, they'll trust the decisions that you're making at the corporate level. When East Coast Wings and Grill decided to launch a smaller prototype, Sam Ballas invested his own money into the first unit so that if it flopped, his franchisees wouldn't suffer. But it didn't. It was a success, and now he has another option for his franchisees to take on going forward. Those are all of my takeaways for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to Takeaway wherever you listen to podcasts and leave your feedback. You can also email our host, Sam Oches, at sam.oches@informa.com. That's Oches, Oches. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.